Hi, everybody. I am here with Rob Banaszak, who is my counterpart, Rev Rob, at the Institute for Spiritual Development in Washington, D.C. Rob, welcome and thank you for joining my Net of Love podcast today.
Oh, Amanda, thank you so much because now I've been captured by that net of love and you can draw me in however
You've,
you want.
al- you've always been in there.
Thank you
Always been
so
in there
much.
since before I met you, I'm sure.
I have no
So
doubt.
Yeah. So Rob's going to talk a little bit about himself, but he does some really awesome things as well as being a metaphysical minister. He's a spinster, so he does really neat club mixes. And I've put those on and kind of just listened to Rob before and go into like a meditative state with them. They're really awesome. And Rob has those on SoundCloud as well as his sermons, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So why don't you just talk about yourself and a little bit about what people should know about you and what you're doing, what your mission is, what your purpose is.
Yes, well, that's always ongoing, as I'm sure you know. But I am currently the pastor of the Institute for Spiritual Development in Washington, D.C. It is the second of the current five ISDs that exist around the country. The first one being Sparta, then came ours, and then Madison, and then you guys, and then Treasure Coast. So I am. It's been a fun ride. I joined that church in 2008, like many do in Washington D.C. And as the internet began to become, at our fingertips, had the church bookmarked. I had grown up Catholic,
Me too.
and yeah, I would say about 85% of our folks in DC were formerly Catholic,
Yeah, us too.
and probably the second, then some sort of conservative Baptist upbringing. So, we've got everybody that were when I joined, when I was looking for ISD, I was looking for a church that reflected what I had now become to embrace as truths in my life. And that's the kind of metaphysical way of life, which I discovered from reading recommended books that some of my friends were reading. I don't know if I was necessarily looking for it, but early books like You Can Heal Your Life by Shakti Gawain, and Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, and Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. So those are my
That's a good
first
one.
three metaphysical books, all of which kind of said the same thing in different ways, but really the idea of leveraging our thinking to create, our lives are creative expression. So to create the life that we want to create. And yeah, kind of in that, once I discovered that in the late 80s, then I kind of held on to those while I was still Catholic. I was a choir boy type, I sang and was really into being Catholic and loved the mysticism. And when I decided to not be Catholic was, and this is a very long way around how I got to be at ISD, but I always felt like I was starting to get things. Like the Catholic Church said a lot of things that made sense to me about our connection and our and what their idea of Jesus was, and it all made sense to me. And there was one Sunday, I think it was Trinity Sunday. It was Trinity Sunday, whenever that is in the year, I don't remember. But the priest was giving a sermon about God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, this sacred Trinity. And as I'm listening to him, I'm like, oh, I kind of get it. Like, there's a father, and of course, when you're a little kid, everybody's like, how are there three beings in one?
Concrete. Yeah, you don't see the
Yeah, like
abstract
I
in
don't
it. Right.
understand, Mom. And you're kind of basically told to believe it. But as I was sitting there, I was like, well, it's kind of like that plays out. That's expressed on in Earth when we have, a parent. We've got two parents who have a child. The child is made up of their unique DNA from these two people, or from the ancestry that makes that child both, its own expression as well as literally its parents. So like I'm like starting to just add this up, like, oh, I get it. This makes sense. And then the idea of somebody who had passed made sense about having their spirit close by. But as I'm thinking this, the priest is going, and we'll never understand this sacred mystery because it's supposed to be a mystery. And I was like, oh, whoa, hold it, hold up, hold up. I'm getting it. Like, I may not understand the way that you do, Father, but I get what you're saying and what this means. And you're telling all these other people that will never get it. And so I was thinking, well, that seems really counterintuitive, because if you did get something, Father, why wouldn't you want to share it as a truth and then expect others to get it with you? And then that's how it's expressed. And the fact that this church just kept saying, no, you're never going to understand because it's a mystery, made no sense to me. So this kind of capped the whole, like, oh, they're misogynist and they're anti-gay and all these things that I was not. It was kind of like the seal. And so I guess I kind of looked for a church that kind of espoused these ideas. I know Louise Hay had had some religious science experience, sought out Signs of Mind and religious science, which really has made a lot of sense to me, and belonged to it briefly to a Signs of Mind church in New Mexico when Wade and I, my husband and I, moved there. But I came back, sad to leave that church, happy to be back in DC. But I was looking for a church that had the same elements: community, very small community, chapel like. Literally, my church in New Mexico was in a residential area, like between two houses. And so when I finally decided to go to ISD, having bookmarked it for so long, I walked up and it was there. There was another chapel, little church sandwiched between two residents. And I thought, wow, oh, this is weird. So I walk in and the sanctuary is beautiful. And in the, as you know, we say in our opening remarks to the congregation, welcome home. We've kind of wrap it all up, that opening, with a welcome home. And, as you guys know in yours, when you hear that, it's like, oh, I guess I'm home. I guess put down these bags and see what this is.
Put down the bags and open the heart, right?
Yeah, open the heart. And I'd wanted to actively. I'd never been raised in like a kind of community volunteering world. My parents were very active in activities, but mostly to support the stuff that my brother and I were doing personally. So I did some music stuff and supported that. So I was really looking for that kind of sense of community spirit and that kinds of the volunteerism responsibility. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to join the church, then I don't want to like multitask. I don't want to get myself too strung out on things. So I'll just do my volunteer work that I've been looking to do at the church. And so whenever things became available for me to sign up for, I did. And that's really how I kind of became involved in the fabric of the church. And then I was very close to turning 50, about 4 years away. And I'd said to myself, you've thought about being a minister for a long time. When I was Catholic, I thought I'm being called to be a priest. And two of my colleagues at Fellowship were talking about the ministerial program, and they explained a little more. And I thought, well, that seems convenient on day one, that they have this program here, and it's probably a lot less than getting an MDiv somewhere. And so I kind of signed on there to do the ministerial program as well, kind of all at one time. So
that's like what happened to me too. It just kind of, it's like, here you go.
Yeah, it all unfolded, and it all made sense to me. And it was answering a call that I knew I'd had with a set goal, because I'm not very good with setting my goals and, working then to reach them. So, it was a 4-year program. I had to join and become a member for a year before I signed up for the program. So it gave me like steps that seemed manageable. Like, okay, I can sign up for the church. Maybe after a year, I'll change my mind. We'll see where we are. And sure enough, at the end of that year, one of our ministers during our affirmation of spirit portion of the service gave me a message and said, oh, they're seeing a stole around your neck. And I was like,
of course they are.
So
beautiful.
So here I am.
It's so interesting, because the way you describe that, and thank you for sharing that. I never heard that from you before, with the father, the mother, and the child. And for me, I kept thinking, where's the mother? Where's the mother in this? Like, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, where's the mother? So my whole childhood, like, I was feeling that dissonance in the Catholic Church. And my mom's going to laugh if she's listening to this, but she had to bribe us with baby Ruths to go to this, every Monday night, because we missed the path we were supposed to be on. And I just felt such dissonance. And I finally convinced her. I was like, no, this doesn't make sense to me, even that young of an age.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like the divine feminine was stripped. I felt that in my soul from the very beginning. And when I turned 18, Rob, and I went to college, I started taking metaphysics courses in college, and I started learning about
Wow.
Buddhism and Sufism and the Kabbalah and the mysteries, even the Meister Eckhart and the Christian mysteries. And it opened this entire world up that I had not known of before, but I did. You know what I mean? I have it. It's in
Mhm.
my being. And I wanted to be a metaphysical minister, but there was no root for it at that time. And I knew, like, I knew I had this in me, and there was this channel that was trying to come through me eventually. And I went a different route with school counseling and that kind of thing. But when ISD was formed, I was in the circles with the people that it was formed with. And just like you
Right.
said, it just kind of dropped in. And it was like, I had that dream at 18, and here I am, in my mid 30s, and here it is. Here you go. So it's so beautifully magical how that comes together. You talked about the mystery, and we can't always feel the mystery in the typical organized religions. And that's where these kind of ancient mystery school teachings start coming in, and we start to open the crown chakra, and we open our abilities. And these are what the priests and the higher ups in the churches had access to. And some of them were able to, I would say, communicate it, but this
Mhm.
is us helping others, channeling spirit through others so that they can be led to the door, so the door opens, so that they can experience the mystery as well.
Right.
And that's what I love about ISD, is because we're supporting direct source connection, and not, it is whatever anybody believes is welcome, which is wonderful, but it's opening that different door that may not have the very logical brain and the very masculine side for so long. We're now dipping into the feminine and the intuitive side and feeling the mystery of it all, the grand mystery.
Absolutely. And I think what's great about this pursuit, and I have to check myself with some, kind of ego related insecurities about this role. So, it's not a Master's of Divinity program that we went through at ISD, but really, when you sign up for that program, you are basically included as a ministerial staff member from the minute that you are signed on. So when that is expressed in a community church where people are looking at you to be this leader in their spiritual development, um, you realize, well, wait, I'm doing, I'm doing the ministry of this church the way I would if I were doing practicum hours with the master's program somewhere. And in the end, what we're trying to do is not to establish any sort of distance from the people that we're serving by, title or credential or any of those things. We're trying to bring everybody together to make them know, hey, whatever I'm doing here, I'm here to show you that you can do it for yourself. So, if you look to me for an answer, my answer usually is I can't answer that for you. What is it? What is it for you?
What is your higher self telling you?
Yeah, what is
Yeah.
your higher self telling you? And I feel
Yeah.
like that's the only trap I see as in this role for all of us, which is because people ask us questions, it's easy for us to answer from the perspective that we are sharing with. So I'm giving a sermon or a homily, and I'm giving you my ideas or my reflections on our experience in the world, but I'm not telling you that you have to think my way. I'm showing you an example of how
What's
I,
possible?
yeah, like I was lost in this moment. This is how I found myself, or this is how I know I want to find myself. And so you too can find yourself in that way because we don't have the answers. No one, we're not going to know anything until the minute we close our eyes, again.
Yeah.
So,
And I think we're changing the paradigm, because it's moving from this like hierarchy, listen to what I say, believe what I say, do what I say, versus a circle where the teacher is also the student at the same time, and the student is the teacher, and we're all learning from each other, and we're having these beautiful mystical experiences together. It's not so, I mean, it's an individualized journey, but it's becoming a group journey too, which is really awesome, because we don't have to do it alone. And for so long, I know, like you talked about hermit, maybe I think before we started the podcast, a lot of us that were, metaphysicians and experiencing these great moments and having our chakras open and, all these wonderful experiences, we're doing it at home alone, at reading our books as hermits. We didn't have people to talk to because it was not something that was there. So it is a new paradigm. It's a new shift. And I'm so excited because it just, like you said, the training may be different, but it's so divinely led. How the people come into our congregation, how we've worked together, and then it just keeps building. It's this really beautiful, divinely led mission that I'm excited for more people to be able to access.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge because we're doing it in a world where, well, the idea of we're a place where people have come from other very conservative, restrictive faiths, which not only have dogma but also a list of rules of how that dogma is, put into play. And so it means that I feel like sometimes that means that because we have chosen this path for ourselves as this community of our respective communities, it means we really can't, our own backgrounds, many of us who are in our generation who are trying to keep some shape to this, have this idea that does have structure to it, that does have, you're going to Sunday service and we're going to choose to be together during these times. But you also have the openness that means that, unlike, organized religion, which may demand that you do things at certain times that may be constrictive in some way, but certainly help keep the numbers up on Sunday mornings and, the bank rolls up when we need resources. So I think that's kind of a little battle that we face is we've come from other places. I'm not going to tell you have to be or do anything for us because that's not what my job is. And that's not why you came to us, including when you come to see us, how you express your own spirituality. So, in my ideal world, I agree with you. It's that community. I think that what we have that others don't have, or that is and often the similar response when you have a dialogue with people is like, wow, I never was able to talk about this stuff before. Mm-hmm. And I'm still surprised at that conversation because so many have discovered, because it isn't 20 years ago when this was just kind of moving into the mainstream with Reiki and all these other practices. So I'm usually a little surprised sometimes, like, oh, wow. I take that for granted now because I had these kind of conversations every minute
every day. Right. And that's the thing. There are people, I would say a lot of people, most people have had some kind of mystical experience that they have not been able to understand or didn't have somebody to go to, right, because there wasn't somebody there to explain it. And now these avenues are opening. So it doesn't feel, and sometimes it can feel a little scary if you don't know if it's the first time that you've had a major synchronicity happen where you're like, wait, that's not a coincidence. That's not possible.
Possible.
That's not possible.
I got together with my husband from one of those experiences. Like that was it. We had been in each other's orbits for a long time and really didn't think of each other in any other way other than, kind of, we shared the same intersection of friends. And it was literally, we were out, dancing together by, series of chances, and this mystical thing happened. And then he had this experience by himself that, when another friend related it to me and kind of made fun of it as they were relating it to me. And I was like, oh, wow, he probably is feeling very alone right now. Let's go talk about this. And so those are the things that brought us together. And, in ways that, at least in my world of gay men, that's not the normal channel of this kind of action. And so
divinely orchestrated, right?
Right. And there was no way that the series of things that brought us to a point where we suddenly found ourselves together for whatever, were so, you always think, well, it seems impossible. And yet when you open yourself up, it seems like it's the most clear thing in the world, depending on where you're looking at it from. So yeah. Which I think all mystical experiences are. And, you said earlier, what is exciting about what we do and what some of these teachings have done, like when you were in college and starting to read some of these things or understand, is that because we sometimes get a bad rap, metaphysics does, or metaphysical communities do, because people are afraid of it's cult-like or whatever.
Well, the science part, right?
Yeah,
Because
and the
there's not a
science
lot of science
part.
to back it up yet. It's coming.
It's common. But I always feel like you don't read these words or hear these talks or however you start getting this information and, and resist thinking and then find yourself changed over to it. You know, it's like speaks to you in a way that you've always known to be true. Like it just,
All
you
knowing.
know, it's all
Yeah.
knowing. And I
Yeah.
think reading Louise Hay really was the first time that, for many people of my generation, even that are here, it's like you just read this book and you're like, wow, I've always thought this. This is the way that makes sense to me about the way the world is and about the way the universe is. And
And
you
it's
just
not, yeah, it's not scientific, it's experiential. So it's experience. Like you can't argue with experience. Like this happened.
right.
It is my science. It is my scientific experiment because it is my self-study and it happened and it keeps happening and it happens at greater, at exponentially expanding more and more and more, the more open, the more, and it's just, you can't, you can explain it, you can explain what it feels like, you can explain what happens in the body or the mind, but until somebody experiences it, it's very hard to put into words.
It is.
Divinity.
It
Yeah.
is. And I catch glimpses of it. And the more I kind of absorbed this way, I began to, well, first of all, I feel like like many people did, I rejected the idea of God as the father, whatever, intellectually in many ways. And, in my heart, but it's hard to, programming is still programming. And so, you
Right.
say, and God is a triggering word, God. And one of the things that I picked up along the way was Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And that book was also instrumental in like reclaiming that word as my understanding of what, again, it really is.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's like seeing what that divinity is in the world. Like it's not just expressed as a being, like, oh, I did the divine in me and that's divine and that's God or whatever, and you have it in you. But it's when I'm feeling that charge from talking to you or sharing something, like that space where we're sharing that is not necessarily our individualized experiences or individualized people or personalities, but this thing that exists between us, that's God. And so like there are days that I'm like, that's how I can see that or I can feel that, and it's like mind-boggling, and then it goes away. But it opens when I say, oh, this is God. That feeling is God. you know how what an action I just did without thinking that served me and others was God. It's so like it's esoteric in a way that, I mean, it's esoteric, period.
And that feeling of at one moment with all in that moment, that deep connection to
Mhm.
every single molecule in the universe, matter and
Yeah,
antimatter, right? You and I have had galactic conversations before. And it's like
absolutely.
what you said in the beginning, the mother, father, son is, the spinning torus field of the galaxy, of the around our bodies, in our electrons, the DNA. It's all there, that interconnectedness. And the more we open up to this information, it starts flowing and naturally showing us these connections in ways we didn't see before.
I just have never understood how in the scientific community that considers itself separate from any sort of supernatural world doesn't doesn't see that it's not mutually exclusive. I just don't see how people don't see that it is not. Like it's whatever you can give me as much detailed science about anything, and I'm still going to say to you that's miraculous. Like the fact that you could think this way, the fact that you could envision this, the fact that any hypothesis that is derived is done from intuition. Like that's how science begins. Is that
Right.
I'm looking at this and I see this and I think that this is something that may be a law or a principle of existence, and then you test it, and of course then the testing and the peer reviewing and all those things are what lead up to this idea of it. But just the hypothesis in and of itself is an intuition. It's a thought. It's a hunch. And
Like
I
Nikola
don't.
Tesla. And then he figured
Yeah,
out how to map it.
exactly
And
right.
that's all science is just figuring out how to map it.
Right. Putting, and again, from that, again, it's our all reality is just our reality. So it's just this how I'm seeing the world that is before me. And and you're seeing the world as is before you in the way that only you
From my
can.
program and from your program. Right.
Right.
Right. And the coolest part is when somebody, a science person, has a spiritual awakening, and then all of a sudden they start connecting it all. And then those are the best books that are out there, really. I
Right.
mean, you think of like the Bruce Liptons of the world and Joe Dispenza, and there's just the who's the guy that did the past life? Brian Weiss.
Brian
And
Weiss.
how he was a psychiatrist and he was so scientific, and then all of a sudden these people started talking about all these mystical experiences in their hypnosis, and he couldn't argue with it anymore.
Right. Yeah. Eben Alexander, who wrote the book,
Yes,
the near
near
life.
death.
What's it called?
I can't think of the name of it, but it's, yeah, people find it. It's a near death
So,
experience thing.
I mean, for me, reading his book was just transformative. Again, because, and this is, I have my own personal ideas about how, that trail of life
Proof of heaven.
when we move on. And I know most past life experiences have always included, for many people, it's been considered they've gone through a tunnel, they've experienced a white. It's very, we anthropomorphize that experience as something that, because we're comfortable with how it would play out in our lives. But he was a neurosurgeon, and he had, a brain injury or a brain disease that when others would have told him this is the point where they had experienced some sort of other level consciousness in their death, and he would have said that's impossible physically, he then had. And when you read about how he had, and for me, his experience was really contrary to that kind of, that going through the tunnel and coming out on the other side. His was very much a very experiential, kind of void thing. So he's thought in a place, and he realizes that he's just thought, and it all shapes out. But his idea of it resonated so deeply, and then like the others, he comes back and he's made this his life's work, and can say, "Look, I was that neuroscientist, and
And
I still,
there.
yeah, and I'm still a neuroscientist, but now I'm telling you that this is also." It's not either or, it is and. So
Yeah.
yes,
It's exciting.
it is very exciting.
It would be fun if you're up for it.
Always.
Rob does an amazing tarot reading. Do you want to maybe pull a card or two for everybody, and we could do a little
Absolutely.
collective reading, and you and I can kind of feel into what the message
Absolutely.
is? Awesome. Let's do it.
And yes. I'm using now my current deck of choice. They're not a sponsor of this podcast, but maybe they could be. Is the Steampunk Tarot written by Barbara Moore. So she takes up the archetypes, and I love the tarot, but I also I really kind of I always resist applying kind of the archetypal stuff, in a fixed way. I feel this way about astrology. I feel this way about many of the modalities that we use. We love being identified in some way. We love being seen when others write about or experience or intuit what our personality type might be based on all these other things. But
we are all that ever was, is, and will be, so we can't forget that.
Yes. And so tarot is interesting because yes, there is a guide, but in the end, these cards exist to inspire, and they exist to shake up our imagination. And so when you're trying to help somebody learn how to read intuitively, and everybody asks the question, "What if it's my imagination?" I'm like, "Well, because it is, because everything is. That's where spirit is in our imagination.
That's how we created everything on this planet."
Right. I remember, just as an aside, I know that there are some people, when we would have classes or workshops or experiences where we were sharing experiences, maybe we'd go into a meditation and then we'd have people describe what they were going through. I'm not one of those people that has these epic visions, dreamlike narratives come out. And, when I first started down this road, and there are people that in my congregation who do, the minute they get out, they can say, well, I went here and, I was traveling down this road and I saw, and it is played out. And I would usually be oh my God, how's that possible? How are you seeing all this stuff in this 5 minutes? And, I'm assigning this idea about it being their imagination, and just feeling like, you know, jealous, I guess, or envious that they were experiencing it, but also feeling like that's not possible. But the more I know, the more I'm like, well, even if you were making that story up in that moment when someone says, "What did you see?" It still is like that's still their imagination. Like,
Yeah.
if it's a spontaneous expression of creativity, then that's what it is. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And it's really amazing then, like, a month later or 3 years later when you're experiencing it in the outer reality.
right, exactly,
Because
right,
that's how we create a reality. And even
yes,
if it comes, from the subconscious, then you're not conscious of it and you're having that intuitive moment and it's spinning out. And, did you see the future or did you just create the future? Right? It's
yes,
not black and
yes.
white.
It
It's
is not black
not.
and white. And now more than ever, I'm like, wow. So I've had touchstones in my life that have appeared from, from my childhood, or I've experienced things that like I'm obsessed with. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with all the magic shows, of course, Bewitched and I Dream of Genie. And I think that this is all a manifestation of that for us. Like, oh, you can snap your fingers theoretically and have this happen. Like, those were metaphors, but I've always felt very connected. So as a kid, I fantasized, especially about Genie, very visceral, images like the bottle and blah, blah, blah. So, when I got to be an adult and I had my own job, my own money, and I somehow, and the internet became available, I researched and found the Genie bottle, which I have right behind here. And
Oh, that's what that is. Nice.
so yes, it is. So this is this is what the original producer used. This is the bottle. It's a decanter from Jim Beam
Oh,
bourbon that he in 1963 got as a Christmas gift, and decided that was Genie's bottle. So that was the template for the bottle. But when I got one that was painted, created for me at great expense, and when I opened it, I remember thinking, okay, so all my whole life, I waited for this moment. It's here. I have this bottle in my hand. Maybe this joyful moment is actually what I was remembering when I was a kid. Maybe it was all gearing up to this, guidepost, which
yeah.
is as part of a cycle, not part of a linear.
Yeah. And that's divine living. That's being open to that experience and seeing that magic play out in your daily life. And it is so awesome.
Yeah,
I
it's
want
well,
everybody to experience it. It's so
I know,
awesome.
and I want to be reminded to experience it as well, which
Yes.
I don't.
Yes. So that's what I want to say for anybody who's viewing this. We didn't talk about altars or anything like that, but that's the whole point of an altar or an object like the Genie bottle behind Rob, is that it reminds us that we are creating our reality. And this is a divine plane. And when we have those things like my Buddha back there, my Kuan Yin, my green Tara, my little chant on the wall, when we're surrounded by those things, it reminds us to be holding that frequency of divinity and that we are powerful divine creators created in the image. So,
Absolutely.
and when we surround ourselves with love and those types of neat imagery that remind us, or those magical experiences that we've had, and then we find something that, like this is a Mary statue, and it's like Statue of Liberty color, Rob. And I
Yes.
got this. I had been getting my Statue of Liberty for months everywhere. I was seeing it, and then I went to Omega, and I was also getting Mother Mary for a couple months, and I found this, and it was too close. It's one of those
You
things
knew.
that's not a coincidence.
Yeah, you knew. You
So
just
right. And I keep this here because I remember that this reminds me that this is so much more magical than our daily personalities remember sometimes. So it keeps us reminding us of it.
and it also, the thing about those things, the all the things that we acquire, those magical tools and tokens and everything else, I think it's our tendency to believe that those things are the actual magic. So I've got a collection of wands that people have purchased for me, or one of my friends has purchased for me. And it's not, the wand is imbued with magic, not because it in and of itself is magic. But
Yes.
it represents for me what that is. So I
The
know that
thought
we like
form.
it.
Yeah.
Yes. So again, archetypal stuff, assigning a property to a crystal or to whatever is a guidepost. So, the world's not going to collapse if two of the crystals that aren't usually put together are in your pocket and they happen to mix, or that you didn't charge them overnight. It's really what you're putting into it. It's whatever you think
Intend for
you
it to be.
intend for it to be.
And you can do that with
So
anything. You
you
can
do that
do it
with
with
any,
anything.
and people, that's the part where So,
Your conversation the next day with a loved one, you can do it with that.
you can do it with that. You can do it with anything. I've chosen these things in my life to surround myself these ways. Nothing has the power to destroy or to, uproot me. And so, yeah, I think that getting people to understand that it's what we imbue to these things is really important, including these beautiful cards.
Yeah.
So let's
do it.
So I'll do a 3-card draw only because I feel like it's the telling of the story that is exciting about the cards. That's why I use them. And
a good read for 2/22/22.
Yes, 222. All right, so as I do this, it can be boiled down to past, present, future, but I really like to see it as where we've come from, which could be like in the last minute. It could be in our minds, or it can be like literally where we are now as a snapshot. Like that's not supposed to stay that way. It's just snapshot. And then where we might unfold. It's really the story of us as a community that is existing in this space together. And I'm just the vehicle to help tell a story about this.
Our potentiality, right?
Yes, our potentiality. The river of potentiality, I think, as David G says.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to draw our first card. And then, Amanda, I can... my phone.
Yeah, you have your little tools for this, your video tools for this.
All right, I'm gonna put the cards down, but I may sign on to this Zoom as another person so that we can share the screen.
Awesome.
I think. All right, we'll see. Anyway, our first card this is where we've come from, everyone. Our first card is King of Swords. King of Swords. This is where we've come from, and I really want everybody to be able to look at these because you can kind of see the difference in the archetypal expression that she chooses, that any artist would choose when they interpret the tarot. So King of Swords. Our second card is Two of Wands. So swords and wands, thoughts, and esoteric.
We're just talking about wands, so that's perfect. It's going to pull that in a little bit.
I love the wands cards. I love this deck because I've chosen, not they're good or bad cards. I want to emphasize this, but I've had really good card choosings from this deck. I got a deck one that I kept just choosing like cards that we don't usually like to choose, which again, it's only my visceral reaction to them. It doesn't mean they're bad or good, but I kept getting ones that I don't like. So so I switched and Two of Cups.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's, there's there's being trained in the tarot to understand exactly what they are, but there's also, and I got to thank Sue Landon for this, it's also just looking at the card and what are you intuitively getting?
It is really,
without necessarily needing to read too much into the tarot framework.
Right. No, I agree. And that's very important because when and that's really, it's an ISD way of teaching because it takes away the necessity to think you have to know everything. All you have to do is logically. And since every author that interprets the tarot makes certain choices in how they're expressed, that you're getting somebody's interpretation, which means that you can interpret them anyway. And I think that's just so beautiful. So
was that Two of Swords, Two of Wands?
King of Swords, Two of Wands.
Lots of twos in there. Okay.
Yes. And so this is interesting because it's actually 10. I said Two of Cups. It's actually the 10 of Cups.
10 of Cups.
Which is a beautiful card in the Rider deck.
Oh, look at those beautiful chalices.
So all the cups are above, above the couple that's sitting there.
Very twin flame energy right there.
Yes.
Which is beautiful on today because that's very reflective of today. Yes. Unification within.
I love it.
Divine masculine, divine feminine.
What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of these now. And then I'm going to send it to myself and then share my screen. If you can make me a co-host of this meeting,
perfect.
I can share my screen and have the cards up.
If it was, 20 years ago, we could have done a commercial break for a few minutes, but that's all right.
I
We'll
know.
just hum it out.
I'm surprised at how much I've enjoyed. I've certainly been captive for so many podcasts that I watch, and so as a result, I've got some life choices that I made based on podcast ads. So, all right, I'm going to send this to myself.
King of Swords. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to talk for a few minutes. Lots of sword energy and the paradox of swords. In the last little bit here for me, which is lay down thy sword, which is a past thing, right? Where we use the sword. There, you can use sword for cord cutting, but swords are also, metal swords are destructive and warring. And we've had this energy of lay down thy sword and hold the sword of light, the King Arthur sword, the sword of light, which is not metal, it's light, and it's that beautiful pillar that connects heaven to earth. And as we hold as divine beings to no longer need to fight and war. And that twin flame card you have there at the 10 of Cups is very showing of what happens when we lay down thy sword and we unify within ourselves. And we are no longer a divided self, eating ourselves apart.
And what's great about this, so we've got one of at least 3 of the 4 suits here, which I find really cool. Let's put this up here.
Those are great cards.
I want to open.
And the cup energy, that my cup runneth over, right?
So a little bit about how I interpret some of these suits. So I do I rely on kind of the basic knowledge of the archetypal stuff, but I also feel very much that so swords for me have always meant some sort of actions that we have to take when our other areas or our other ways of working through the world aren't working. So it's like the last ditch effort. Like it's like you're gonna if you can't get through the reeds through your esoteric powers, your thinking or your whatever, then you have to take this. You gotta pull out the sword and cut the stuff down. So it's really a tool for kind of taking action in a way that is as a final resort.
And there's that king energy with those swords.
Right. Which is interesting. Wait, how do I open this?
And the important thing for people is to take what resonates, and it might make sense to you for something right now, and it might not, and that's okay. Ask your higher self, right, Rob?
Yes, please do. Definitely ask your higher self. All right, hold on here. I'm gonna get that. What can I call it? There we go. All right, ready to share finally. Okay, here we go. Share screen.
It'll be worth it, I promise.
All right, there it is. This is actually good. Thank you very much, because now this is a way I can actually do this for my actual readings at home.
There you go.
All right, so we've got the idea of the King of Swords. For me, it's always like this is from where we've come from. So I think what we're talking about as a group here is we've come from a place where we have had to kind of almost single-handedly make that choice that I was just talking about. We've had to put on our big boy or big girl pants to do something that perhaps might seem like it's an act of some sort of force. We are imparting a will. The King of Swords with the divine masculine has had to exercise both in office as the king as well as with the suit, the swords, some sort of forceful action, and I'm going to say willful action, not forceful. So it is really an act of our expression. So we've come from this place. We've had to, in this situation, made those choices. And I'll just move on just because I think it all makes sense when we start looking at the cards together. So as the Two of Wands, so, we've got this person standing here. The wands are in this deck. I love this deck too because I love steampunk art. Are those glowing candelabras that you see this man standing with? For me, the wands have always represented like a magical wand. It is our way of gathering that esoteric energy. It's like our mojo. It's like maybe we're intuitive, maybe we're healers, maybe we've got just like a luminous personality. It's like whatever we use that is not in our physical world to get through our world, our magical stuff. How do I do it? Do I use my charisma? Do I use my my intuition? Do I use my connection with old people or young people? However we connect with the world in an esoteric way that we can apply consciousness to help us move that way. So where swords is something that is willful, that kind of takes over where maybe our other stuff has not been working or works with it in another way. Our wands are like our magical stuff, our mojo. And we've got two of them there. It's twin energy, very much so. And so I don't know, it's right where we are. This is our snapshot. It is this balance that exists in this moment as we're overlooking the landscape of what we are here to do. And this is not part of the major arcana. This is a suit card. So we're looking at our daily life, basically, and how we are using our stuff. The man in this card seems a little not confused, maybe reflective of the use of that power. So
from the King of Swords.
From the King of Swords, I think, or like, so maybe he's reflecting of what the choice he had to make to be in this spot here, where this twin energy. I've got some balance going with my own personal magic. And then finally, so the Ten of Cups, which is in the Rider deck, it is two people standing underneath a rainbow, and the cups are like overhead, and it's just it's a beautiful card. There's abundance. I think there's a little kid in the card. It's just the cups for me are abundance in so many ways. I mean, yes, they represent emotions. We are vessels to be filled in some way, but they do reflect, I think, abundance and our feeling of deservedness for that abundance. So, I feel like this is a couple that has tremendous opportunity. All those cups are, and if you can see, they're in various stages of turning. So some have been poured out, some are empty because they're facing down, and some are up because they are, they're solid there. But I think we can see that this is probably, there's gears there. So these cups probably turn, which means that, there's an ebb and flow going on right there. Those cups are being filled and they're being emptied. They're being filled and they're being emptied over and over again, just like life. But I think that in the number 10, we can see it on the page of just how full that is. There is a fullness to that level of flow. And perhaps each of those cups represents an area of our lives where we are having this ebb and flow of life. And if this couple is that kind of unification of this wholeness, of this energy, then, sitting beneath the sun that is either setting or rising, depending on your perspective, I just see that as an abundance that is there for us to claim in our next chapter, if these cards are going to play out the way they play. So
look how cyclic the chalices are, right? Like the moon. They're so, look at the cycles.
Oh my gosh, they really are. Yes.
Right.
They really are. Like,
and the gears are spinning them, and that we continue to move, we continue to evolve, and things are going to feel, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I will go into meditation sometimes, and it's almost like a cup is upside down, and it's like that inversion. Okay, I need to flip that around, and I'll see it flip around sometimes. And we can feel and sense when things are upside down and don't feel right, and we have the power of the wands. We don't need the sword all the time. We have the power of the wands to shift that within us, to shift our frequency and raise our frequency, so that these things happen more naturally and more self-organizing versus having to use force.
Yes, so that's a beautiful that's a beautiful interpretation. I love that a lot of the cups cards and all the decks and any deck you would choose, sir, you see cups in a state of either they're being emptied or they're being full, or and when I think about the cups as being our receptiveness or our receptivity to deserving our abundance, uh, I think that the first card is one of will. Yes, in the past we do have to make choices that are very willful. I think that the two of wands, as you said, represent our ability to kind of be that, to use the magic. Those choices we have to have had to make sense. We can't. So in order for them to make sense, we have to believe that we've made them, and this is where we stand. But the thing I love about this is that it's almost like an interpretation of a card where I see a spilled cup is one where I'm thinking, wow, maybe you've let your guard down. Maybe you've let yourself think that you don't deserve this. And so there it goes seeping down the road. But this one kind of says, divinely, that's not your problem. Like, it's filled and it's emptied, and it's filled and it's emptied. So you just relax. I'm not going to tell you in anything that you have to do to make this better for you. Either believe in yourself more, or maybe give away some if it's overflowing. This shows me that, like, no matter what you do, that constant cycle of flow is there from start to finish, from wax to wane. So I think that's pretty cool.
Wax
Is
to
that
wane, like
once
a
it's
moon.
guesswork out of it, it's like, no, it's the abundance is there. So you could just sit there and
Well, it's like that 3D version of needing to control and grasp and figure out and be logical about it. And that's kind of what the King of Swords is doing with that book, the logic, right? And then the Two of Wands, it's like, well, maybe I need to let go of the logic so much and surrender to
right.
divinity, so that I can open my heart to receive this and trust that everything's working itself out so that I can. And I am purging those old ways so that I can release that control, so I can be more open-hearted to receive. Because that last card is not two people divided and fighting. They're together and they're working together, collaborative, hold it hand in hand, heart in heart,
Yes,
knowing how the gears move and being mindful of how they move, and that's okay.
yes. They're literally underneath the trellis that is those gears, and so that's their frame. That's our framework. That's how they are choosing to live. They're young. They're just starting out, and they've come together with this sun at their backs. Again, it doesn't. Actually, to your point, because of the cyclical nature of the chalices there, it doesn't really matter whether it's evening or morning. It's the cycle. So we find ourselves in this space where the sun is just, the intersection of it is just perfection, So
Beautiful hope and trust. That's what's so good about these readings, because it's like, oh wait, I have to remember to surrender to trust for me to create that. For me to create that. And that's what I was going to say. The Two of Wands, it's like, okay, wait, I don't need the sword. I can do this with the power of my intention. I can say, help me, show me. And those things come in naturally. And that's a shift. It's a shift for humanity to choose more of a divine path than the old ways of doing things.
and we even in our roles are still doing this. We have to do this every day. It's
Yes.
uh
Like you said, we're living it while we're also speaking about it.
yes. So, and
Yes.
I think that's the exciting part, is as well as it's the responsible part. And when it hits you that you are in a place that you literally have created, because it's your reality, it's both exciting, but it's humbling, and it's also annoying. It's like, because it works when it works. This is great to have this experience of the divine between us now, but like, what I think our goals are individually then are to like sign off, and then when we're experiencing something in our world that brings us some sort of disharmony, is to reflect on this moment and remember the harmony that exists, so that we can choose to, as it's coming at us, go, no, I choose to see it another way. But we can each then connect and hold each other accountable and say, hey, without shaming, but when we assert ourselves in such a audacious way to say our thoughts change our world, or words are thoughts that are expressed in, and again create our reality, then I would love to have a community that trusts itself enough to say, oh my gosh, Amanda, could you help me? I'm feeling really out of sorts about my connection with this person, and will you please, if there's if there's kind of like, if you see me in a meeting and we're all with this person, can you just kind of give me a high sign when you think that I'm beginning to get very human in my response, so that I can just check myself, not be shamed for it, but just go, oh yeah, I'm letting these other things affect, and I'm not going to see this experience that way. I'm going to see it another way. But
And it's a
just like a
whole
little
new
high sign,
openness.
like they do in a.
Yeah. It's a whole new vulnerability to be able to do that and to be honest about it and to know thyself. Okay, I do this. This is an old sword type thing I used to do. I'm trying to let it go. Help me to be more intentional and more loving, more loving. Yes, exactly. And this 3D matrix, when we're in the harder parts, it's showing us where our separation, and our separation is shown to us through others a lot of time, because we're often projecting our own judgments that are coming through others to us, that we've for a long time not have been awake and aware that that's what's happening. That self-responsibility that you talk about, to say, how did I create this? Where is this in me that I'm seeing it outside of me? Not that every single thing is, but knowing the paradox that there's a part of it that is, and then there's also a part of it that's theirs that they need to work on too. So, and instead of like tearing ourselves apart for those really hard moments, looking at them through self-love and saying, okay, yeah, I got that. I learned it. I figured it out. Now I'm going to go back to my divine matrix over here. And then more and
Right.
more, we're more in the divine matrix versus that 3D matrix, the more we heal those things.
It's hard though, because I think that the humanity part of it, and one of the things, issues that I'm championing are, I suddenly have realized how much, like, the ego, or what we have been told the ego, has been given like a bad rap. So we spend a lot of our time focusing on what we would be horrified of if we were in our conservative religions, about God did this and the devil did this. And I had this revelation. We're doing some Course in Miracles work here in DC, and I just became aware that we talk about the ego as if the ego is a stepchild, or some sort of part of us that has to be kept away. Or I'm going to say, no, ego, leave me alone. I don't want to listen to you. When I just had this insight as I was trying to figure out something for myself, and I thought, well, gosh, I have the other side of me. I don't want to say the dark side, but another side of me is something that does this. It either berates me, or it beats myself up, or what, all these things.
And all of society does, yes.
And all of society does. But
the inner critic.
if we're honest, instead of being so afraid of what the ego has to say, then the fact is, if the ego is a part of us, the ego representing all these other parts of us, another side of us that is not necessarily the benevolent one, then it does have something to say. It may be saying it in a really half-assed or weird way, but it's saying to us something. And so long ago we had a workshop at ISD where we took that gremlin side of ourselves and we drew a little picture of it, and then we put it in a jar and we put it on a shelf. So I had this revelation, and I'm suddenly thinking, oh my God. And I just took like a little part of myself somewhere, and I drew a picture of it, and I ripped it away, and I put it in a shelf. It is literally suffocating in this jar.
Yes.
No wonder it screams in my head all the time with no words, because I can't hear it. It's like doing this. So it could be cursing at me, maybe.
Yeah.
Probably is. But and I was in a therapy session, and the therapist just said, so did you ever think about giving it voice? So in my mind, well, yes, I recognize that it's there. I know it's there. It's great me. I know I have a shadow self or whatever. But then I thought about this thing on the shelf, and I'm like, okay, so what if I open the jar and not been so afraid of it, what if it had to say, because I'm bigger than that. So,
Because you're
but
suffering. Yeah.
so I sat down, and usually I do a very, my daily journal is a conversation with God. Basically, it's basically an instant message with my divine self, which is
Beautiful.
within. So, and so that's easy. Like I give myself the love and all the support and all those things that I seek in those pages. But there's been this other part that's been going, hey, 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 give me a minute. Just give me a minute. And so I just sat, and I just, as if as respectful and as reverent as I am to that benevolent self that lives within, that is supporting me, loving me, I gave voice to this part of me, and speaking a lot of things that we might say, that was vile. I've got it all down. Like whatever I had to say, I'm like, go ahead, have it. Just, I've never done this before. What are you going to
Yeah.
say? And it was all those things that you hear in your head all the time that you think you hear. But there it was on a page. There it had been expressed. And when that part was done, it was like, oh my God, that's all I wanted. Like, that's all I
Yeah.
needed. I needed 5 minutes of your time so that you could actually hear, rather than pretend like you're
Like,
here. This is what you're
and
doing. Then
ignore it and shove it down.
shut it
Right.
down.
And then you're healing it while you're listening to it and working through it, which is beautiful.
And I got to this
And
point where I could love that part, because that part really did.
yeah.
Okay, maybe misguided, but it still had, it's part of me, so it still had my best interest at heart. I always have my own back.
Mhm.
So if I always have my own back, then what we consider the ego, which kind of becomes our own demon or Satan, also has my. It does. Again, misguided, not helpful,
Yeah.
based on a whole bunch of things from when we were raised, like ancestrally, but
Yeah.
still is only trying to protect. So if I love that part of me and consider that part as just part of it, then I can go through that list of, whatever tirade, and I can find out what the truth that it was trying to tell me, which was, I did say I wanted to be or do this thing. I wanted to be this way. And yes, it was berating me in a way to try to shame me to be that thing. But it still was about me saying, oh, I want to be here. And so that other part of me, again, created from so many other things from when I was young, but still having me at its heart, it's just trying to help me. I mean, just it's
Yeah.
trying to do what I ask it to.
Trying to keep you safe. It's because
Yeah,
it doesn't feel safe. So it's like, yeah. And I found that a lot of times that voice is, it's like you're not paying attention. You need to
right,
listen to me. You're not
right,
paying attention.
right,
So I'm going to get louder until you start paying attention, because
right. And
something isn't right about what you're doing and you need to pay attention. And then it gets loud and then it gets angry. And then it's like, okay, all right, let's talk.
And I feel like that. So again, I'm like, so whenever I come up with, and because we do it all the time, I think we instinctively, it's all written. The ego is just like this marginalized part of ourselves. And it's like, no, it is a part of ourselves, which means that we can't suppress any of it. And
And that's wholeness when we no
it's
longer suppress
wholeness.
it. Right.
And if I'm going to let it, if I'm going to love it, I got to listen. I still have to listen to it. I still have to listen.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
not
I,
tear ourselves apart because this energy is coming through and it doesn't feel good. And it's better to write it in a journal than taking it out on somebody else
right,
because you
exactly.
didn't listen to it.
Right, because it's all of a sudden now I'm screaming at somebody else, and that voice has been so like prevalent. It's going, I didn't ask you to scream at that person. I didn't ask you to go histrionic on that person. I wanted to get to you. So,
Yeah. It's
you're now
about
like
you.
transferring it. Yeah.
It's all
So,
within. Right. Right. All right. Anything else that you want to share, Rob, before we go? We're definitely doing this again. And we are
yeah,
going
oh my
to,
God,
we could
yeah,
go for, I say this to everybody I talk
hours.
to, but we could go all day. We could seriously go all day.
I know, and this is
Um,
great.
and we probably do on the inner plane. So
I'm sure we do. And
anyway,
if you come to one of my
so
services, I do too. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
awesome. So I will I'll put some links to some of your materials in the podcast when I pop it on YouTube. For anybody that wants to see it on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, it's Net of Love as the YouTube channel. And you can also put in there Institute for Spiritual Development, Amanda Hoover, Rob Banaszak, and you'll get all that good stuff to come in. And we'll do this again one day, okay?
Yeah, soon.
All right, my dear brother.
Thank you. Mwah. I loved it.
Love you.
Love you.